We are three friends who are talking and learning from interesting people working in various industries, sharing their stories and journeys so far. These are your hosts,
Hiloni Punadar,
Atit Kothari,
and Tapan Desai.
and this is What the Hat. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any episodes.
Welcome everyone to the first episode of What the Hat Season 2. Our guest today is the principal of SVKM's Dwarkadas J. Sanghvi College of Engineering in Mumbai, popularly known as DJ Sanghvi College. He has published more than 130 research papers and has 4 patents under his name. He has guided more than 8 students to achieve PhD degree, and he has managed to get the institute autonomous affiliation with Mumbai University, which is a great feather in the hat for his achievements. In this episode, we discuss with him about his journey as an academician, his experience of teaching in a pre-internet, post-internet and COVID era, the 5 principles that he lives by as his leadership motto, along with deep discussion of his belief in spirituality, need of having a guru in life, and implementation of principles of Bhagavad Gita in everyday life. We have known you as a principal. We have kind of communicated with you more on those lines. But today, having to know more about your journey, how have you chosen this path and things that you have learned along this path, I think that's going to be a lot of insights to everybody, including us from DJ Sanghvi. So this is surely something that most of us are waiting for. And like just to give you a glimpse, like we ran a small survey and a lot of people recommended that they would want to hear from you and they would want to know about you more. So that is where we are extremely happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. You all have been wonderful alumni, so hope that we keep continuing with such kind of interactions, wherein we can have a strong alumni base of DJ Sanghvi across the world, I would say.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for considering my interaction or whatever you call it, this interview.
So, sir, you chose a different path from the norm, right?
Yes,
Instead of going through do a traditional job in like a MNC or some company or starting your startup, you decided to pursue a field of teaching. What guided your decision?
if you look at my background, my mother has been a teacher, an headmistress in a school. Grandfather was a teacher. So right from the early days, I was quite inclined. This is the kind of answer that normally people would give if you throw at them such a question. But in my case, it was very clear right from beginning that I will want to make a difference in the lives of others rather than just being a money earner working for a corporate firm. Because here in the teaching profession, you get to interact with a lot of human beings. You can help them shape their career, the foundation, the behavioral pattern, the inputs, everything that you can uh, put in terms of transforming the lives of an individual. If you are able to contribute to transforming an individual, I have always believed that it is a teaching profession that can do it in the best possible manner. It's not that people in the other profession are not doing it. They are also probably contributing to transforming lives, but a teacher can do it in a better way. I've always believed. So it was very clear after my engineering that I want to be a teacher. Of course, for initial experience, I worked in an industry in Mumbai and then switched over because, you are a teacher, but some experience at least on the shop floor as a manufacturing engineer, production engineer, you should have that kind of background. So initially I worked and then moved on.
I've just seen you, like, I just know you as a professor. And, like, while reading your bio, I came to know that you've studied in VJTI and IIT as well. So, like me, most of the students wouldn't know your past experience or what you've done before DJ. So, do you want to talk about that as well?
I was in the industry, as I mentioned earlier, then moved into a polytechnic. That is our Bogobai Polytechnic. For 1 year I was there. And little over 1 year, and then DJ Sanghvi got started in 1994. So that's a time when our founder principal, Dr. DJ Shah, and he picked me up and he said, okay, you come in there. I was in the mechanical department working in the Bogobai Polytechnic. And in the first year, drawing and mechanics you have. So to teach subject like drawing, I was chosen. He said, you can come and join DJ Sangvi. And of course, then you had to go through that university interview wherein you have, a big selection panel wherein experts are there from BT, Directorate of Technical Education, IICT and all that. But so with him, I moved. So I'm there in the college right from beginning, 1994. I was hardly 22 then. Uh, Parallelly, I was doing another course, postgraduate diploma course in VJTI, which was an evening working professionals kind of course. So most of my classmates used to be industry experts who would come there. It was a 3 years course. It's a postgraduate course. Only graduates in mechanical, production engineering, or automobile engineering were allowed to do such a course there. University of Mumbai's course called Postgraduate Diploma in Industry Engineering, and I was on the verge of completing it. And then once I started teaching in DJ Sangvi, I knew that in the long term you would have to have a master's degree, because for the career progression. And then I sat for the test and got into VJTI, completed my master's there. And then, as you know, as you grow up in your career, you need to have a PhD. So next destination was IIT. So 96, 99, 96, 98 actually, defense of my masters and all, it happened in the early 99. And in 2000, so there I completed my ME, and in 2000 this PhD thing started. So it's been all along study, teach, study, teach. So, and then next little over 5 years it took to complete PhD from IIT. So in the sense now, when you talk about experience, learning, what comes out of all this is that on one side I was teaching youngsters in DJ Sangvi. By then, from first year, that drawing and things like that, I quickly moved on. I knew ki if you're going to get stuck in a subject like this, or first year, then you'll be just there only. So when production engineering was there, I could start subjects related to my field. So on one side you teach youngsters, and on the other side you are learning also. Because in BJT and all that, those older days, those professors come in, they would naturally retire from there. That staff retrenchment wouldn't happen. It's a full career of 30, 35, 40 years of service for a teacher. So you were learning from somebody from the pre-internet era who would be technically very strong and good. And then slowly the shift started later on, beginning in late 1990s, 98, 99, 2000. Internet started coming in, emails and things like that. So on one side, you are interacting with youngsters who are technology friendly, and on the other side, you are learning fundamental concepts from elderly teachers who would be very strict about things. You have to learn, this means you have to learn. Whereas when on the other side, when I am teaching, students' demand would be, sir, tell me what is relevant for exam, just teach that much, for us to score. Don't teach us too much of funda. This would be the other side. So all this probably would have helped me reshape my thinking in the teaching field, because the change that is happening, the pre-internet era, post-internet era, the teaching methodologies, the approach of students, the approach of teachers. I was lucky enough to get a deeper understanding of the change and transformation that is happening. And then I finished my PhD in 2006, started in 2000, finished in 2005, then the defense happened in early 2006. So since then, I have been able to contribute more, full time being there in DJ Sangvi. And then it moved on. And in 2007, management decided to make me the vice principal. And those days, there were only one vice principal. So in 2009, February, I took over as a principal of the college, as an in-charge principal in 2009. And then in the 2009 April, which is about close to 2 months later, the actual principalship, full-fledged principal, I took over on the 1st of April 2009. It's now more than 11 and a half years. So all along, this has given me a lot of experience, being a teacher there, founder teacher in that sense. Those days with 180 intake in college, I wouldn't know everybody by name, all students. Even when I used to be going to VJTA for my ME classes, at least half a day, I would be back in college. So interaction with students and all were much, much more during those days. Smaller crowd, you know them better, you know them personally. So a lot of mentoring and all that we did has helped. And of course, you all also keep learning a lot from students. This is one thing that I've always believed. We all learn from each other. So learning a lot of things from students also contributed to my shaping up as a teacher and later as an administrator, vice principal. So after I became principal, the management said now the workload has increased, so you appoint a principal. I said I need two vice principals. So they said okay, then you can have one administration vice principal and then academic vice principal, and that is why my colleagues Dr. Dattadar and Dr. A.R. Joshi initially took over, and then later for health reasons he said no, he cannot continue, and he just wanted to be there in that department as a teacher. So he quit the vice principal academic post, and then Dr. Manali Goche has been since working as a vice principal. So we have those two.
To that, you brought up like a very interesting point about your transition from a non-internet era to an internet era and the whole shift in the learning process that has happened. And with over time, more digitalization and access to information online. And I mean, in the current scenario now, we are probably in the COVID scenario where now it's getting more in terms of like online learning and video learning classes and video sessions, and also like online platforms like Coursera and such platforms coming up with good information. Like, where do you see one, what is the transition that DJ Sangvi has personally taken up in the COVID area to like kind of still maintain that learning process? And second, like, how do you foresee the whole education space for higher education, that is engineering degree, like moving forward or going ahead?
So they started with what is called a COVID-19 scheme for institutions that were affected by this COVID situation. They said, okay, we'll give you free of cost, unlimited, your teachers and students can do a lot of courses. So I think as on today, our students, I think more than 6,000, 7,000 courses have been taken up by our students. Big number. In fact, our SVK management, they were very keen to know that DJ Sangvi took the lead in this whole thing. And from among all the institutions, when the bar chart was put up, ours was a big tower, and NMIMS and all others were, not having so many numbers, in spite of being the student strength higher than ours. So what I did was through 5 faculty coordinators, we popularized these courses, and we told all the students, now you have to do. Of course, one or two departments made it compulsory too, but then before making it compulsory, we knew when it's a free scheme, you're getting to do courses from some of the top universities in US, Europe, Australia, etc., Canada. So one should take advantage of this situation, and therefore we could motivate and inspire maximum of our students taking up courses, and all of it that we picked, especially in the month of May, June, July, because that was a gap. We had finished with the event semester. So before starting the odd semester in July, August, we had that time. So many of our staff and students took advantage of that. Even personally, I also did 13 courses, during
wow.
this break. Yes. So yes, in that sense, we know that COVID-19 is changing the way education, teaching, learning, delivery is going to happen. But I know it wouldn't entirely be, as some of the policymakers and others must be thinking that, I believe that some policymakers might be thinking that we don't need to invest now in education institutions per se in terms of infrastructure. You can deliver many things online, etc. But I beg to differ in that sense, that this online learning is not going to be completely occupying that space. Because we realize that when we are teaching students right in the class, right from the eye contact to the behavioral pattern displayed by the student, even as they are imbibing the knowledge, the teacher can adjust, readjust, reposition, and all that. So the physical delivery of knowledge inside the classroom can never ever be replaced online. This is my feeling. And at the same time, a lot of it can be duplicated in the sense that if you have the right kind of platform to deliver the knowledge, either through practical sessions or theory sessions in the online pattern, in many cases, it would help lower standard institutions in the remote areas and all. You can help them, uh, use some of these that are being practiced in higher educations of better quality, like we know the content created by many of the professors in IIT etc. we use in our institution also. So in that sense, yes, as a developing nation, our country India, with less infrastructure in smaller areas, smaller cities and towns and village areas, uh, this kind of facilities that we can provide in terms of creating our own course content. We learned a lot from Coursera. Now we are trying to tell our teachers, can you also be creating courses like this and put it up for the benefit of others? So that is the next phase that we are going to get. So in all of it, yes, it is a transition period. Teachers also have to work that extra, hard. They have to work their extra mile. But I believe in the future, many of our teachers will be putting up their courses online, uh, with, for the benefit of others. But as far as our college is concerned, our institution is concerned, it is going to be a mix of, in the future, when COVID-19 restrictions etc. are lifted, whenever that happens, let's say next year, 2020-21, and students are able to come back to the college campus, I believe, uh, along with the classroom delivery, some kind of online thing also is going to happen.
Yeah, I think hybrid model is the best. And personally, I have signed up for so many Coursera courses, but I never end up finishing.
Yeah.
So I think there is some need for physical, space, like where you're sitting with other students sharing knowledge. That it's very difficult
It's a
to
big
replace that
difference.
online.
See, knowledge is one thing, but that internalizing it, if you have to use that knowledge to transform yourself, then internalizing it in the right manner, conditioning yourself to adapt to future requirements wherein you're going to use this knowledge, etc., can very well happen only in a physical setup, I would say. It just doesn't happen online, because you need to be, as you rightly said, you need to be with your friends in the classroom. You make mistakes, you wouldn't know, you learn from others. Sometimes you're sitting in the canteen and discussing about something, or in some other place in the college premises, in an informal setup, ideas keep getting generated. All that happens in a very informal setup outside the classroom, as well as in a formal setup inside the classroom. So the college environment, the institutional environment, that certainly makes a big mistake. It makes a big difference. See, we all know in colleges and schools, uh, you learn, you are assessed, and you know what definitive outcome you are going to achieve depending on the level of effort you have put in. Let's say, for in school, if you're in 10th standard, you put in so much of effort, so many hours per day, you're going to be in the bracket of 90 to 95 or 93 to 97, etc. So you put in less effort, you are in 80. So education definitely prepares you for a predictable outcome. But in real life, that's not the case. It just, a lot of uncertainties, a lot of difficulties. So nothing is predictable. Even if you do everything best in your practical world, things can go wrong. Something, you know, uh, unexpected can turn up. So there's a lot of learning, and that, I think, the transformation which I've been repeatedly saying can be brought in only with that on the field learning and on the field experience.
So, what does your day to day look like right now? Do you miss teaching students? Do you teach right now, or?
No, my teaching has now for the last many years has been restricted to taking few sessions for master's degree students and PhD students. Sometimes I take lectures on them for on research methodology or on world-class manufacturing subject, etc. But that's not like teaching, undergraduate students where every week you have to go for 3 hours, and then chapter by chapter, module by module, you teach
Yeah.
their assessment. That I was doing in the initial part during my principalship, but then I realized it is too demanding. At times, you are about to go, leave your cabin and go, and then suddenly some issue comes up. Because now, in that sense, taking up administrative positions is like you may term it as an academic suicide. You can't really, a lot of it's 80% of administration, and remaining part of 20% is only teaching in that sense. So I realized that undergraduate students expect a lot from you. If you are a subject teacher for them, they expect you to be regular, Every week you come and take lectures, then you have to set question papers, assessment, all of it, you have to be a part of it, Then I knew okay, I won't be able to do justice. Just going and telling something that is related to the subject is not sufficient. You have to follow that particular protocol. So then I said, okay, and anyway, having done PhD, research, etc., rather than just solving certain problems or questions of the undergraduate level, you would rather contribute it to a slightly higher age group students at the masters and PhD. So I knew that, yes, that works. Smaller group, you can give them practical, approaches in your discussions and understanding, etc. So in the last more than close to 7-8 years now, you can say, or even more, I'm more of a teacher at that level, which is not that regular teaching, but you call for a session, you sit with them for 2 hours in the conference room or in some seminar room on the fourth floor in mechanical department. The small rooms are there, So there, these discussions, etc. happen. So my academics is now limited only to that. But of course, I make it a point to publish papers, research papers, jointly with students on a very regular basis. Is in that sense, it is more than 20%. What I meant is 20% only you can get involved. But then if you stretch out, you work extra during holidays, late evenings, spend late nights, etc. You can keep contemplating on research topics, ideas, etc. So recently we published 4 patents also, Indian patents, design patents. So that I have now. Uh, so in a way, even if you're an administrator, you need to be driving the whole process through, various taking various steps beyond the regular academics. Like an institution should also have paper publication done by faculty and students, patent publication, conferences being organized, seminars, webinars, and workshops, etc. So even in this COVID period, in the last 5-6 months, I think we had a very significant number of webinars and faculty development programs organized, not only for the benefit of our teachers and students, but also even for people from other institutions. If I was to have more time with students outside my cabin, I would have been really the happiest, but it just doesn't happen. Someday you go and sit at 10, 10, 15, 10:30 on your chair. You hardly get up 2-3 times during lunchtime, just, for half an hour or 10 minutes or 15 minutes at times lunch, or once or twice to go to the restroom. That's it. And then you realize now it's 6:37. So it's like the day just goes in. So many things keep happening. In all of it, then finding comfortable time to think about academics, learning new things is a big challenge. That scarcity of time is always there. So you have to make up for that by working extra in the evenings at home or on Saturdays and Sundays, etc. Which, with grace of God, I am able to do now. And with that, yes, it has to be top bottom, not top to bottom approach. Now, most of our teachers do publish papers and they are into organizing things and all that. So there is a good value addition happening in the college.
I mean, that was pretty insightful. Definitely, I mean, your transition, I mean, going above your administrative role and actually inspiring your faculty members with the more like actionable inspiration where you yourself are pursuing so many things. That's actually great. And something, I mean, as an entrepreneur also, like a learning lesson from here that like my job also has a lot of times where I have to address issues, but at the same time, your self growth is equally important to make sure that the team is growing and you are much more aware and have more insights to add to the industry. So something that I can relate to.
Yeah. So in an education institution is just not only teaching and bringing good academic results, but also, how much of funding you have got from funding agencies for your research, say from Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, or AICT, All India Council for Technical Education, or Mumbai University itself. So in all these areas, we have been able to, most of the cases, the starting had to be done by me. You just start, get it. Recently, I have got for my research, I don't know the exact amount. We had put up about 25 lakhs proposal. So I've got a letter saying that it is sanctioned. But the exact amount I do not know. That will come, but it could be anything close to that. So then when somebody hears, okay, the principal has got something like close to 25 lakhs of funding from AICT for his research work, then the other teachers start. The same way from university, now I think at least on an average about 20 odd plus teachers every year get some kind of funding from Mumbai University in the form of what is called minor research grants, etc. So then, and also your student base at the PG and PhD level makes a big difference. I have already finished guiding 7 PhD students, another 4, 5 are in the offing, another 2, 3 years they will finish. So all of it takes a lot of effort, in the process. This is not self-promotion. I'm just telling you the journey, which actually can motivate other teachers. And now we have 3 research centers in the college of the University of Mumbai, one in mechanical, where I am a research guide, and then like EXCC and computer. So all this is very important in terms of additional inputs. Because when you want to get your programs accredited by NBA, that is National Board of Accreditation, New Delhi, they look at all this criterion. They just don't look at only the classroom teaching learning process and things like that. How you design your curriculum to everything, the achievements of students, staff, research, the patents, all of it. So all our programs in the college are accredited by NBA. And also we have the institute-wide accreditation called NAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council. So you have both NAC and NBA. Now we are an autonomous institution. So it's basically, even as I am saying all this, I must admit here, all this happens if you have a good team. Our teachers, the quality, their level of involvement, our students, very importantly, their caliber, their capacity, willingness to be parcel of the journey. I think there is a lot of vibrancy. I know many institutions. I can say it quite clearly, but in the sense there is a big gap between teachers and the faculty members on aspects. In our college, I think the gap is not so much. In the sense, students feel comfortable interacting with teachers, and teachers also would guide them. Many other institutions, you feel there is that gap, and there is and that reflects adversely in the assessment, and then you have students have issues about teachers not evaluating them properly or not grading them properly, or all that you say, anything about negative part, grievances, etc. In that sense, in our college, it's not there to the best extent. So that happens because of the overall academic culture prevailing in the organization. And again, I believe that has to flow from top to bottom. How I deal with the vice principals and the heads of departments and associate heads will definitely have an impact on how they will subsequently deal with the teachers.
Right.
And at any instance, if anybody feels uncomfortable, it is a natural intent, natural inclination on the part of people, to transfer that further down the line. If I am not treated so well by my higher authorities, I tend to do that with my subordinates and things like that.
Right.
So if you look at that entire hierarchy in our college, at every level, there's that positive vibes and the academic environment, which I know some of you must have definitely experienced being alumni of the college.
Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. Very, very rightly said. I mean, all of us here can vouch for it that we have interviewed a lot of our past guests who have been DJ alumni, and everybody has such strong, fond memories, and their building has happened in DJ Sangvi. Their growth journey has started there. So I mean, absolutely the whole reason that the institute has provided both even like study based and at the same time extracurricular activities, which together shaped each and every student so well. So the right balance also really helped. Like, at least for me personally, it was a very good strength that I built while I was in college.
Yeah, even the admissions committee in like US university, when you apply for masters, they know DJ Sangvi at this point. Like they know, we don't have to say we are a part of Mumbai University or we were a part of Mumbai University or anything like that. They know DJ can stand on its own now. So yeah, absolutely the
level of
culture that we learn.
The level of penetration of our students into the MS programs in US university, if you compare it with the age of the institution, age of the education institution, that level of Indian society is very high, the level of penetration. If we are compared with institutions like, let's say, VJTA or other older institutions, they have already had a strong alumni base, having completed their masters from US universities or other places. and we being a relatively younger institution, but the penetration that impact penetration impact that we could have has been substantial, I think.
And adding to Atit's point of like DJ standing on its own, like DJ recently, during our conversation with Mayur sir, we found out like DJ recently became an autonomous college. So congrats on that. So
Thank
like
you.
how do you see a change happening in DJ after gaining that autonomy and like what is next in store for DJ Sangvi?
See, now this autonomy means it's academic autonomy. In the sense, University of Mumbai gives you the right, or the UGC. In fact, the autonomy is granted by University Grants Commission, New Delhi, to which all the universities are connected. So when UGC, after all the evaluation over a period of so many visits and things like that, finally when they grant you the autonomy, the University of Mumbai also in turn will have to issue a letter saying that, okay, we have now added to that, and then the government letter comes from DT, Directorate of Technical Education, etc. So this autonomy is what is called academic autonomy. You can have your own boards of studies in various departments. Like for example, in the Department of IT, you have what is called a board of studies in IT. So you can have board of studies chairman, normally is the head of the department, but then you have to compulsorily have members from industry, maybe from IIT, from other institutions, research institutions. So when they're all part of the board in planning and devising your scheme and syllabus, it gives you a lot of newer insights into what the industry is looking for.
Yeah.
So after becoming autonomous, now we have 8 boards of studies in the college, 8 branches. And then you have your own academic council, you have your own governing body, and governing body is the highest decision-making body as far as the autonomous institution is concerned, wherein the chairman of the governing body is the president of the trust, which means SVKM's president is the chairman of our governing body of DJ Sangvi.
Okay.
So he also looks at, he attends all the meetings. We have had 4 meetings since July 2019. Both in the conference room as well as online. So everything to do with the academic part in terms of the curriculum delivery as well as assessment is what is coming under this autonomy. Whereas the admissions is still controlled by the state board, the board of, the DT in our case, Directorate of Technical Education. Then for all enrollment, eligibility, everything, we are dependent on Mumbai University. And so all this administrative part still continues, but we have full freedom to devise our own teaching learning scheme, then revise the syllabus as and when we want, depending on the industry needs and requirements, and conducting the exams can be at your discretion. When this freedom you have, I think this is where you can make a big difference. See, finally the degree is going to be given by the university, but in terms of the academic full planning, designing the curriculum to everything, assessment, you do on your own. Now tomorrow, if I realize that a lot of IT experts are talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, or some other computing methods like cloud computing, which has been there, or Internet of Things, all I'll have to do is talk to the management, saying that from alumni or from industry experts or from professors from IIT or other institutions, this is what is my learning, this is what we need to do in the future, change. And then they will in turn decide at their level, and they'll call me for a meeting, discuss, okay, why not we start with the program. So this year we have started with data science program, computer science and engineering, data science. Next year we are going to start 2 more courses. That is computer science and engineering, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And the third course called computer science and engineering, Internet of Things, cyber security, including blockchain technology. So I put up this proposal to management. They said, oh, it's all the era of emerging technologies. We need to change. We need to move away from conventional courses. So they discuss, then they give me the green signal. Then I call for board of studies meetings, discuss, write application to university for permission, and also apply to AICTE. So starting a course has become easier now. Therefore, I think autonomy gives you a lot of freedom, gives your students a lot of choice. We have now the institutional level electives, which none of you could experience during your time. Even in the Mumbai University scheme, it is there. But then we have more. A student from electronics can take a subject from IT department, or somebody from IT can go into UXCC and take. So that we're slowly moving in the direction of established US universities, etc. That's what most of the autonomous institutions do. And one day when the management or all the stakeholders feel that now as an autonomous institution, the college has matured sufficiently enough, and then the next then the next step could be what is the called as the setting up of a university. Whether it's a DJ Sangvi University or SVKM might decide, we'll call it SVKM University, under which DJ Sangvi will come, or they might try to integrate few commerce and arts colleges like NM and Mitiba, etc. Bring in under one umbrella of what is called NMIMS SVKM University, because our management already has another university called NMIMS Jim to be University.
Yeah.
So we may not be, will not be part of that. We could be probably part of another university, you know.
Yeah, I told this to Mayur sir also during our podcast, but I wish I was starting my undergrad now in DJ, you know, like there's so many options, so many more flexibility, as you said, in picking courses.
Department level electives to institution level electives called open electives, etc. gives a lot of freedom.
So we want, and based on our previous conversation, you said you were taking some sessions on Bhagavad Gita, and we actually want to know, like, how do you align your spiritual learnings with your everyday life, and what are some key things that you have learned and actually applied as well?
The spiritual word should not be confusing, you know, because for the new generation, when you hear spiritual, it is something, you know, okay, my dadi bolti thi, or, you know, things like that, dadi nani. It's for me after retirement and things like that. My understanding of spiritual learning is very simple. You know, what are we basically? Are we just this body, mind, and intellect, driven all the time by temptations and attachments and desires? Are we something more than this? When when you are devoid of turbulence and stress, you are at peace, you enjoy a lot of happiness, right? So being with your natural self, being simple, knowing that, okay, my body is decaying over a period, my mind is decaying, something that I enjoyed playing with in terms of toys during my childhood, no more, and gives me that joy when I'm an adult, when I'm growing up. So the same object gives me different experiences at different stages in my life. So I'm aging in terms of the mind, uh, thinking capacity, processing capacity, discriminative ability, etc. So all of it is changing. The body is changing. So is there anything that is unchanging as far as I'm concerned? My understanding is that it is that spark. It is that different faith, different people call it differently, etc. So it's about that spark that enlivens you to speak, to talk, to all that, to lead your life. That is pure. We bring in a lot of modifications to our day-to-day life to get adapted to different situations and things like that. We bring in, driven by our five senses. We get in a lot of input from the external world, the material world. So, and often we become a victim of that. So my understanding of spiritual is that, in different faith or religions, great masters have always advocated self-control, control at every stage, control your senses, limit your desires and attachments, etc. This is what we learn. And this is so, in my spiritual understanding of learning Bhagavad Gita, or even sometimes talking about it, is be simple, realize and accept the reality that you are something beyond this BMI, what is body, mind, and intellect. You shouldn't be artificial. You shouldn't be putting up, because we live in a world which I call is a make-believe world. You put up everything and try to show, all that is fine. For us to succeed in our material world, this is all required. But at times, if you have some kind of reading and practicing some of these core fundamental values, which we call is coming under broadly the spirituality, it helps. Now, Bhagavad Gita is a text of the universe. It doesn't just offer a solution to a particular climatic issue or some certain things happening to a particular place or a time. uh, Bhagavad Gita is not necessarily giving a solution to that. It gives a solution, but Bhagavad Gita actually gives a solution, gives a solution to which is applicable to all type of people, suiting to all times and all ages. Often Bhagavad Gita gets attached or identified with one particular religion or one thought, which is incorrect. It is applicable to people of all faith. It is just talking about you as an individual. A highly depressed, dejected individual called Arjuna, who was in the battlefield, an extremely great archer. He knew everything that he had to do. Why he was there also he knew. He knew all options were tried out in terms of wanting to avoid the war. All negotiations with Kauravas at every level through different emissaries and discussions and so many, but everything failed. So it was that negative forces were wanting to overpower you and finish you off. So Arjuna or the so-called Pandavas could not avoid the war. They tried everything best at their level through discussions and all kind of amicable ways. But finally, there was no option but to go for the war. We reached the battlefield. This gentleman called Arjuna knew what he should do. Capable man, capable individual, for various reasons of overthinking and wrong thinking in that sense, finally tells Lord Krishna that no, I cannot fight. What will happen if such large scale destruction happens? And then he attaches so many things to it. There are so much of reasoning. When you want to avoid something, your mind starts creating excuses. So many things. And finally, he also had that feeling, what if I lose the war? Because on the other side also, there are extremely good and capable archers like Karna and, Dronacharya and all that. So he decides to give up. Then the Lord advises him, see, all options were tried out. This is it now. You need to do it. You need to do your work. You need to get attuned to your, duty, call of duty. It was not an advice to fight. It was just fulfill your duty. After having exhausted all other options, you need to, and then that 18 chapters of the Gita with different slogas and teaching 700 slogas in that sense, all that reinvigorates the man finally to do the work. In the sense, he didn't call Duryodhana and say, oh, see, Arjuna is feeling bad that you've got 11 battalions with you and he's got only 7. So you please reduce few battalions on your side. In the sense, I'm giving just an example, no external setting was changed. Everything was as it is. He only lectured this guy and gave him the right inputs at the right time, so that internalization, that conditioning and that change, the transformation, in fact, the best word to use here is transformation. The transformation had to happen in that individual called Arjuna. No other changes externally. Nothing happened. So all of it is learning. So I believe we are all Arjunas in our sense, irrespective of our faith or religion or caste or etc. Because we all go through different situations at our workplace, at our in family, neighborhood. Challenges come. There is a lot to put you down. It's not just only happiness all the time. You see a lot of mix of stress, and we all say that all of us are stressed out many times. I don't think in any situations or objects there is stress. It is certain situations happen, our own inability to react to some situations like that, manifest in the form of anger, worry, tension. These are all byproducts of what is called stress. So stress manifests in all this. So this particular individual in the battlefield was stressed out. Therefore, he gave excuses. And finally, when he's given the right inputs and right guidance, he wakes up to the call of duty, and then all, that the entire battle happens, etc. Some of these fundamental values given in texts like Bhagavad Gita or any other text of any other religious books, they're all applicable to all of us. We need to just know some of it or most of it and try to live. For example, you lose nothing to be simple. If you're a simple person who can create that sense of comfortability around you, and in your presence the others feel better and happy, as compared to a situation where you may be a great guy, intelligent guy, and you have a big job, etc. But your presence makes so much of turmoil and tension and botheration for your fellow people around you. Now look at both these situations. So you lose nothing by being a simple person, and wanting to practice some of these values. I think you gain a lot, in the sense the biggest byproduct of this kind of practice is that you grow from within, because all of us live our life of 60, 65, 70, 75, whatever age. We go on earning money, we go on earning fame, but if you really analyze, all of it has got its own limited utility in terms of the fame, name, all of it, and ultimately what, your body is aging out, you are accumulating a lot of uh, you know diseases and things like that. Instead, being simple, learn some of these so-called spiritual learning from any of these texts like Bhagavad Gita or many other Upanishads, etc., or from other religious background, etc. You tend to start thinking about your being just one in this entire ecosystem, in this cosmos. You lead a life that gives you peace, happiness, and comfortability.
Yeah.
So my understanding is just that, and I feel it has made a lot of difference, because building a team around you, uh, managing all of it. See, we are what our mind is. It's very important that that four strings. Actually, it is five. It is displayed when Lord Krishna is controlling that horses. Five is shown. Actually, it is technically four: the nose, the ear, the mouth, then the eyes.
Nice.
Okay, so the tongue and the skin is basically one. That sense of feeling that you get from this. So it's basically controlling that and achieving your balance, and creating a very comfortable mind. So basically, it's all about mind management. So my understanding of Bhagavad Gita is about it. You can call that textbook as the manual of anger management, anxiety management,
Yeah.
or anything that you do, it is there in that. And I believe it is not just the possession or the uh, property of a particular religion. It is applicable to all at all times. That's what I said earlier. It is not necessarily giving you a solution for a particular time and place and individual. It is applicable to it has been there.
Yeah.
The knowledge Einstein and Newton, what they found out and gave it to us, was always there. They found it out, in the sense, we call it inventions, but uh, they said, yes, apple gira, this thing happens. Then we started thinking about it. So the knowledge that is given by these kind of texts, the knowledge has always been there. It was transferred by word of mouth from masters to masters. Today, in our era, it is there, existing in various textbooks or videos or other things. I think one must learn all this. One must get inputs, and whatever field you are in, you be in the field of material life, make money, do everything to gain fame. But if you carry with you in this process some of this knowledge, some of these inputs from textbooks like Bhagavad Gita, it will do a lot good. You will become more efficient, you become more capable, because it's all about you as an individual.
Like in Mahabharata, it's written, right? Like what is here is elsewhere, what is not here is nowhere. I think that's
Right.
how Vyasa starts. So yeah, as you said, like what is existed, the knowledge has always been there.
Always.
It is, yeah, makes sense. Okay.
So we are moving on to our next segment, that is our top three. And we have some insights that we want from you and some recommendations, starting with top three books that you recommend and one book that you have gifted the most.
See, Art of Man Making is one book that I've always liked. Art of Living, Art of Man Making, Manual of Self Unfoldment. These are books that I have, whenever possible, I have tried to give it to my friends. And then Practice of Vedanta is one book, wherein again talks just about how you must control yourself and what you need to do in your normal day-to-day life. So I would recommend those books for you to read. Practice of Vedanta, Manual of Self-Unfoldment, Art of Man Making, and Art of Living.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. So you have been a principal for, as we discussed, for 11 years now. So you would have built some models or principles in life to help you lead the organization and the people around you. So you want to know, like, what are your top three lessons that you've learned being a leader?
So I have always believed that human resources is the most difficult resource to handle in any organization. All other resources you can still manage, but human resources. So I have, again, we are saying the same thing in terms of team building. The model that I have adopted is that don't interfere in anybody's work. I don't get involved in the departmental affairs directly at all, except that occasionally we have, say, department meetings where we discuss certain things, which are HOD meetings, heads of department meetings. And once certain decisions are taken based on what I get inputs, from top, certain discussions happens based on that in the HOD meetings, and then the head of the department or the associate head of the department is entirely free to implement it there. Give everybody space. Have faith in everybody, whoever is going to be implementing whatever it is. So this model has worked for me, Tapan. Don't interfere unnecessarily in others' work affairs or whatever in terms of workplace management. Give them, show faith in them, give them the space. Don't interfere unnecessarily. Then people will own it up. People will own up whatever is expected to be implemented. They will own it up and say, okay, it's my duty. I'm being recognized for it. I'm being given freedom. There's a lot of flexibility involved, so let me do my best I can. So this is one model, one thing that I think has always worked. Second is, you must respect all human beings. Every dog has his day, we say. Even the crow, we keep waiting for it once in a year. Once in the 365 days, it has its own importance. So every individual will have some importance or the other, and you should never feel that somebody is lower, somebody is higher in their stature and qualifications, etc. So respect all, and it should be seen genuinely happening. It cannot just be mechanically shown, show respect. It doesn't work. People know it. This is being done just because he wants to get some work done. He's doing it this way. And when the work is over, he's different. No, you can't do that. You will have to be your natural self all the time. Then the people work. I used to take pride in telling some of our trustees also, this accreditation time and all that. I said, sir, I used to tell my trustee in charge that I can even request 90% of the lady staff members and make them wait in the college and work till late evening in a short notice. Now, why I say lady staff members? They have their in-laws waiting for them at their house. They have their children after having come to school waiting. So a lot of responsibility at their house, travel difficulties and this and that. But if I give a call saying that right now I've got an urgent email from the Directorate of Technical Education, we need to provide this much data, we need to give it in this form. Madam, can you wait? Can you do this? Many, in fact, during this accreditation time and the autonomy efforts time, they will immediately be ready to do it. They will immediately call and make arrangements at home, inform their spouse that, some urgent work has come up in college and therefore I'll come 2 hours late. And then we will also ensure, we'll have to take 2-3 ladies together. Okay, you tell them you're leaving late, book a cab and go, and the college will pay for it. You all travel together, don't go separately. So you need to have that concern. And this is not asking they're asking, it is we have to provide. Okay. So what I'm saying is, even the most difficult task of getting women employees stay back in the organization beyond their time with a short notice given to them has been possible. I think that comes only when you respect them in the most natural manner, always.
This has been a wonderful conversation, from learning about your journey in academics to administration and then your entire spiritual journey. We have learned a lot, honestly, and thank you so much for being a guest on What We Had.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Because talking to youngsters, I'm now 51, but I don't look that old just because of my interaction with youngsters around me.
So that's about it, folks. We will be back next week with another guest and another story. We would love to hear your thoughts about the episode. Feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You can just search What The Had Podcast. Also, Subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from, so you never miss out on the next episode. This is Hiloni, Atit, and Tapan signing off, and this was What the Hat.